Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. It is my absolute honor, pleasure, and joy to introduce Shannon Sims. Shannon is a passionate health educator and food artist based in Portland, Oregon. Her work aims to ignite conversation and dwell in the overlapping realms of food, wellness, and creativity. And speaking personally, I have never met somebody who is more in contact with the intersection of beauty, justice, power, food, and love than Shannon Sims. Shannon, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you so much.
Oh, Nick, just bring it.
Oh, gosh.
Thank you so much for
Oh,
that gracious introduction.
oh, my total pleasure. So, Shannon, by way of introduction, can you talk a little bit about who you are and what brought you onto this path?
Absolutely. Wow. So to begin, I come from kind of a non-traditional culinary background. So I have a lot, I traveled a lot as a young person and began sort of by default working in kitchens. And so when I took a gap year after high school, and that was really my first time making food for quantity, right? So I worked at like a field station in Belize, kind of in the backcountry, and I was learning from these amazing Belizean women cold pressing juices, like making food for student groups. So we would get groups from the UK, Canada, the United States, a lot of foreign, universities would bring students there to the field station, and we would be making a lot of meals 3 times a day. So this was like my first real introduction to like being on a schedule and creating large quantities of food. And so that was really like a big opening for me. I was a buyer. Like the manager of the property had to like bow out at a certain point, and I had to step up. And so I was just like an intern, but all of a sudden I was like driving a truck in the middle of Belize, having to go to the Amish farm to pick up like 40 chickens. And you know what I mean? It was like all of a sudden, like when I think back on those moments, I mean, I was like 17 years old, like it's like I think back on those moments and I'm like, wow, like those were actually really formative and like influenced my path in a way that I, can see now, but I never could have seen coming. Um, and so, just really learning through like the school of life about food and the process, going out with the truck to the grapefruit orchard and picking a bunch of crates of grapefruit juice to make juice for the people in the morning. And um, my path continued to wind in college, and I was studying, natural sciences, and I ended up sort of in like a health path because of my mom's diagnosis with cancer when I was like 18. That was also a hugely informative moment. It was like sort of when you're 18, you're not necessarily thinking about your mortality and like what your body is going to look like or feel like when you're 50 or 60 years old. So these were like big concepts that were coming through for me at a pretty young age. And, primarily I just wanted to help my mom in any way that I could. My mom was like my number one person. And so I started studying like nursing and, kind of being like, okay, could I do like a conventional path? Turns out no. And so, long story short, I ended up moving to Portland to study massage after I had kind of my like mental breakdown about the whole medical system and how that was not the place where I was meant to be. And so I really kind of went from my, creative arts background into like the, sort of creative healing arts. I learned about energy. I learned about, the body. I learned about, and through sort of like as this whole process was happening, my mom's illness was kind of going up and down as she was experimenting with all kinds of alternative medicine. And I was learning about raw foods and, cleansing diets, juice fasting, all these miraculous things that people do when they, finally have an ultimatum like cancer or a chronic illness that like pushes them into, a more devotional food path. And so there was real magic, coming through plant medicines like herbalism, all these different things kind of started to braid together in those years. And after a while of being in Portland, just working in the farmers market community, like it was, not so long after that Food Art Love was born, and I began sort of operating in my own holistic way. Um, despite all my attempts to kind of like feed myself into one industry, it was like, this actually is like a much bigger picture. And like, I couldn't silence that part of myself. So really my mission here is to help people connect the dots between all of these areas of their life and regain this holistic picture of wellness that includes things like activism, advocacy, exercise, health, sex, relationships, communication. All of these components are what make up our holistic wellness. Finances, it's like no stone is left unturned.
That is so beautiful. And it's really interesting that that path went from a space in which it was really focused on the specific crucible of the food and then a really specific crucible of health, and eventually expanded to include so many different things. And one of the things that's very intriguing about your work that I've found in my observation, and that you can see a lot on your Instagram at Love Shovel, go follow it now while you're listening to this, is that that underlying all of that holistic sensibility is a real dedication and fidelity to beauty as part of it. Can you talk a little bit about how that beauty, that sense of beauty, and that connection with the beautiful informs your work?
Absolutely. That's such a great question. So when we think about like bhakti, or like this sense of like connection to the divine through the worship of beauty and the creation of beauty, coming from my, as a kid, like that was always my proclivity, right? Like I did really well in like the visual creative arts. And so it was always natural for me. I also used to do a lot of mosaic and like things like that with like multimedia textural kind of stuff. And so the food really just, it was like so obvious to me that I would relate to it as an art medium. And, having just all the different amazing inspirational people in my life who, sort of influenced me and kind of taught me about the different ways that I interact with food. When one of my best friends growing up, his mom had a catering company called Savory Time, and her name was Cindy Heaslett. I just want to speak her name because she really, like, when we look at those like crazy platters and the big giant food spreads, like her style, her husband was a potter, and he would make these gigantic, beautiful handmade platters. And it was like such a ceremony, it was like everything was so thoughtful. And she would go out, it was like this whole process of like the day before the event, like she would go out and like pick from the garden, like they grew all these flowers, and then she would like create these little like amazing arrangements that would like go into the food. And it was like not even necessarily because you were eating those things, it was literally just to enhance the natural energy into the food, and also just like create this incredible presentation that just like, even if you just like, that's the thing with art, it's like, even if you just stop someone for a moment, just a split second, enough to like interrupt whatever thought in their brain they're having, it's like that's the moment you can redirect every thought that follows. So it's like, that's really a big motivation for me about like bringing, it's like, once you have the attention, like where are we going with it? So I want to create something that like is like so dazzling that people just have to be like, what is happening here? Like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this. Or, like, and now I get to eat this. Like, so often people are like, I don't even want to touch it because I don't want to mess it up, but it's like, that's part of it, and like my whole philosophy pre-COVID was obviously like, I wanted it to be like primal. Like, I didn't want everything to be like manicured and perfectly little, like teeny cuts. Like, I wanted things to be like recognizable in shapes that like people had to pick up with their hands and like chew with their mouth and like have this like very kind of primal interaction with the food. And that's just my own philosophy. But yeah, the beauty is a huge piece, and just the ritualization of like, you can do that every time you make food, even if you're just like making scrambled eggs or something, it's like there is a way to, it's like the energy that you bring, that's like that's the way of the alchemist. It's like you bring that energy And that's the thing that can influence the whole interaction. That's like influences the whole ritual with the thing that will then literally go inside your body and become your physical cellular material. So we're making, informed decisions. We're bringing our awareness into the process. And it's like, what makes me happy? Like, what color am I craving? Like, what color am I craving next to this color? That's like Flora Bowley, who's like my,
Yes.
sister in cosmic love. She has this process in her painting process where it's like the color craving exercise. So it's like, oh, I'm seeing this color, like what color am I craving next to this color? So it's like these lines of, it's like we're talking about a painting process, but we can also be talking about our food practice in the same, it's like those lines are very blurry, when we talk about where we draw inspiration and how we create beauty. It's like food is so beautiful just as it is. And that's my work, is really just to like heighten and celebrate it at its most natural, beautiful like essence.
That is so phenomenal. And it makes a lot of sense in that when I was thinking about how to explain like who this person of Shannon Sims is, I was like, she's a food alchemist. She's like a sort of like a culinary priestess, etc. But I understand that the frame that you gave for yourself with it, and you feel free to take any of those if you want, but was as a food solutionist. So can you talk a little bit about what it means to be a food solutionist and how that manifests in your work?
Absolutely. Thank you again. Food priestess is a new one. I've never heard that one quite like that before.
Feel free to run with it if you want, but
That was my back pocket for later. That's so sweet. Yeah, I actually for a long time, like I never really resonated with the term chef. I was like, that's really not like what I am. Like I don't resonate with, like I didn't go to culinary school. I've never worked in like a restaurant industry. Like I've never had like a throwing around, bang around, like, crazy like line cook job. Like I've never been that person. So it's like, with all due respect, like I don't even necessarily feel I have the qualifications sometimes, like to like call myself that. And people, will argue with me on different various levels. Like I just have my own thing. And so I feel like that title doesn't represent me. And so I've always kind of leaned towards, food artist, food solutionist, like, food solutionist comes from my work as a health coach. So when I first started Food Art Love, that was primarily what I was doing, was like sessions with people. We would like kind of do the diagnosis and be like, what's going on? What are your goals? Where are we trying to go? And like, how can I help you identify the major issues? And then we can create solutions within your food practice to like make your dreams come true and like get you from point A to point B and like where you're trying to go with your life, and do something that is also approachable and sustainable. So we don't just like give you a whole blank, carpet full of like, it's like we can't just like make tons of changes overnight and expect that to be sustainable. So it's like it's a process where we like introduce 1 to 2 to maybe 3 things a week, and we just begin to like see what sticks, what's working, what are you enjoying, what are the results of like how are you feeling like by making these shifts, like, and just like checking in. So for me, the food solutionist piece is really being able to like hold space for a person holistically. Like a lot of my clients would come to me and they're like, I want to get fit, or like, I want to do this thing with my like meal planning or whatever. But it was like, that's where all these other components of wellness started to come in, where it's like, oh, well, like this month we're really tight on funds because my husband got cancer and now we have to pay for all these treatments. And it's like, how can we still be healthy if like we don't have the money or something like that? There's like a money story, or there's like, I have a bunch of kids and I'm like, they're all really picky. And so anyway, there's like an infinite array of issues that can come up. We like, my husband was diagnosed with diabetes. So like now we have to change our whole entire lifestyle. And like, we literally can't eat the things that we used to always eat every day. And now we're totally lost, so like I come in and I'm just like, this is my superpower. I'm like, open up your cupboards. What are we working with here? And like, I have a whole spiel on like how we can maximize like the dollars that are going out, and use strategic tools to make sure that we're actually using the product that we're bringing into the home, and then utilizing the stuff that we already have So we're not like just storing stuff that's like sitting around getting old and like kind of collecting dust, and like it's just like inventory that's just there, not really being used. Um, so yeah, that's like one of my like I love doing that with people. I love being able to kind of demystify the process. It's a language that I feel like I speak very fluently, and whether it's like farmers markets are the answer to your problems, or maybe like going to food banks and like accessing different resources that the community has available, like from everything in between, like that's just like my world and I love living in it. It's like my favorite way to like be a guide to people to help demystify the process.
That is absolutely fabulous. And one of the
Mhm.
things that I was really struck by what you were just describing was that there's a way in which both health and beauty and food are all durational, meaning they take place during a certain time period, for example, the beginning and the ending of a ritual, the beginning and ending of a meal, and they're
Mhm.
all impermanent. Like that, we don't actually want, for example, food that won't ever go bad. That's not good for us. Food will eventually go bad if it's good for us, and that beautiful things aren't beautiful forever. We're not healthy forever
The
for it.
impermanence factor. That's so true.
Yeah. So towards that, how do you play with those intersections of the impermanent and the durational as part of this?
Yeah, I love that. And then I love that you brought in, the ritual aspect. So like at our breathwork ceremonies, we would always end with like a beautiful platter, and like, people will be like kind of in this liminal state, and then they're like looking at the food and they're like, wow, this is so beautiful. And like it's like that deep level of appreciation for what's in front of you once you kind of are like in your expanded state. And then you're like interacting with this like art piece that you're then being nourished. So it's like you're giving your energy to the art piece, and it's like that's informing the product that's before you. And then it's like you're intaking that beauty, that ritualized food experience, like directly into your body. And it's like helping you physically ground and bring your spirit back all the way into your body. So it's a very important part of the process, actually. And I think in some ways, like there's so many things that I've made that are like crazy, and like especially for like large events and different things that were just like, this is bonkers, but like there's no photography, like there was just like no time for me to like stand up and take a photo or whatever, capture that. So there is a lot that's like it just lives in that like impermanent state. It's like this like big wave of creativity, like the creation happens, and then it's like the people who experience it, they take it in, they love it, they have this amazing experience, and then it's like it's incorporated into them, so it's like it's changed form. And so now it's like it's out in all those people who experienced it, and it's like that now it's like on its way in that way. So in that way it's like the impermanence manifests as like it's literally just like nourished and continued people on down the road. And then of course like being able to like be a little bit more disciplined and like make sure that I was like documenting things so then I could then share them. And that's why my Instagram exists. Everything that you've seen, with the exception of a couple of different shoots that I did with like more professional blogger type people, everything that I've done was for clients. Like that wasn't like I'm a blogger and I'm just like making all these food things. And then like I worked for an agency and that was like my life. And it was like we made so much food that wasn't for anyone. That was just like, if I didn't save it and like run it around to all my friends, like it would have just gotten thrown away. And that's like was a very difficult and very clarifying moment for me, that like, there's so much intention and purpose that goes into what I make, that like it's really important for me that like that 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 part of the process, it's like the loop gets closed. It's like it's one thing to just like offer it to the earth and like recycle and compost and stuff, but like, you know, so the way that my work can kind of carry on is like through the experience, the lived experiences of other people who are eating my food. And then also like the way that we've been able to like capture the essence of it through photography and like being able to share it in that way.
Love that. I absolutely love it. And you're sort of articulating this real food as practice paradigm, this whole framework in which the way that we engage with our food and nourish ourselves and nourish one another is its own practice in and of itself. So, how can we use your food as practice philosophy to really create a pillar that supports the rest of the spiritual work that we're engaged in?
Wow. Okay, so this is an amazing question. The food as practice sort of philosophy was born out of, my years of my own having all these other wellness practices, right? So it's like we have our yoga practice, we have our meditation practice, we have our mantra practice, we have, whatever, all these different practices that we have. And yet it's like, I kept coming back to like this, so I kind of describe it as like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like not to be like too linear, but like, we have like this foundational need of like, we have to eat food, like we have to breathe air, like we have to sleep, like we have to do these certain things. And that's universal. Like that's totally universal. Every single human can relate to those experiences and those needs and the struggles and tribulations that can come from trying to find balance in those different areas. And so for me, it was kind of like I was supporting people in this process of like trying to get their food life together. And it's like they can climb the ladder, they can get the success, they can have the relationship, they can have the financial success, like all these different things. But it's like they can only, they can only go so far before the fissure in the food world starts to pop up. And then it's like you have to address this issue with the foundation before you can really climb to the top of the pyramid. And so what that looks different for every single person. And I'm a big believer in the bio individuality. Joshua Rosenthal, who was the founder of the the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, which I did do. And that was, really amazing and powerful experience for me. And, relating to food as a practice for me means, waking up every day, and it's like just like your practice. It's like some days you fuck up and you really mess up and you like just totally drop the ball, and some days you nail it. And it doesn't matter. It's just every day you have a choice to begin again. So, sometimes we're on it and we nail it and we're like going good for a while, and then something will travel a bunch, or like some kind of family crisis will happen, something will happen to disrupt the rhythm. And it's like we just have to know that like this direct action of feeding ourselves is one of the most foundational practices that we engage in. It's like every single hormone, I mean, all the gut health, the messages that are sent from the food down into the gut that get sent into the brain, from sex drive to, our literal mental state, the foods that we crave or don't crave, the way that those foods affect our mood or do not, the energy levels, all our immunity, like all of these different things are directly affected by this very controllable variable, our food, for most of us, I will say. So I know that there are definitely there's situations out there that like people don't necessarily have access to food, or, they live in a food desert and it's very complicated to like access, healthy foods. But for the majority of the people watching this, I would say that probably you have a large degree of control over what you're consuming. And for me, that's like this huge moment where we have to like treat this with the respect that it deserves. I mean, it's okay if sometimes you need to eat a granola bar and a matcha in the car and like just be like whizzing on your way to work or whatever. It's like we're like out here getting the job done and we're like doing that. But like even in the motion and commotion of like activity, it's like we can still be engaged. It's like when our mindfulness like leaves that, it's like it's just a sign of like where else in our life are we avoiding connection. It's like, why am I not able to be present even now, with like the simple action of nourishing myself. So yeah, this is a big topic, but the foundation, solidifying the foundation and just bringing that level of, like we said before, kind of like bringing the energy, it's like I come from this world of like, raw foods and like sprouting and like this very like, I like to call myself kind of like a reformed raw foodist. because I still incorporate a lot of the practices that I learned from raw foods, and they help me so much in my life and in my food practice. Like they nourish me so deeply. But I also, it's like I realize that that's like a very unsustainable and impractical method for a lot of people to use for their diet. So, um, you know, there's like you can bless the water and then pour the water on the beans and soak the beans and then bury your crystal in the beans and like do all this. Like you can get really heady with it, and like that's awesome. Like if that's what works for you, like go for it. But it's also, like I said, it can just be as simple as like just bring the energy that you bring to that interaction. It's like it's really you are the lighthouse,
Yeah.
as friend Jaguar woman would say. It's like, we bring the energy to the interaction, and that's our contribution with our alchemy. So it's really important to me to not get too far out there with these ritualized food things, because it makes it inaccessible or unattainable feeling to people who maybe aren't hardwired with like a food program yet.
Oh,
So
I love it. And because it sort of incorporates the reality of people's lives with it. Like that it's about the quality of adding being volitional and being present with it. That if you are going to eat the granola bar as you drive down the street, or I keep thinking of like, to be frank, like a fast food run or something, be present with the decision that you make to do that. Don't do it just out of that exhaustion. Don't do it while you're just dissociating out from your present time experience. Like actually be there for the decision making. And I'm struck that in the frame that you give for food as practice, that food and our culinary and dietary and nutritional choices become both the means by which we heal ourselves, but also the diagnostic by which we understand where healing comes in, where we disconnect from our experience. And that it works, as you touch upon in there, both on the individual level for looking at where we as individuals are doing so, but also on a social level, that are the sort of the barriers that we put in place around food indicate some of the injustice and the places where some justice can be served. Can you talk a little bit more about that intersection of food and activism, and what sort of reforms that would be helpful to address that justice?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is another huge passion of mine. Like I said, I spent a lot of years in my early 20s. I was very connected to this organic farm. I was blessed in college to get connected to them through a friend who, I would just fill in shifts making like huge vats of salsa for the farm. They sold at the farmers markets. And then when I moved to Portland, they were like, oh, hey, like we always need help at the farmers markets. I'd never worked a farmers market before. And, I was new to the community, and it was like, oh, great, I can have access to this awesome food. And like for me, I was just like, cool, like I'll go there, work these hours, and get all this amazing food at the end. But it ended up being so much more. I mean, this was like one of the major turning points in my career. I met so many industry, restaurant, culinary industry people, chefs, like all the, big fancy restaurant people. Like they would come, like be like super early in the morning. We'd all be like still getting our first like cup of matcha or coffee down and like waking up, and it was like a whole vibe. It was the whole vibe. And they would come early to get their produce and secure their stuff for the week, so they had for their restaurant, their menus. And I just was like witnessing kind of from the outside, like all of this culture, but like connecting with these people, and just building the relationships with food producers. So they talk about like knowing your farmer and like, like shake their hand and ask them questions. And like, so all of a sudden it was like by proxy, like I was like super close to a lot of these farming, professional industry people. And so small scale, like a lot of just like natural and organic practices. So I felt very blessed by that experience, so that I could, speak to that from a level of sort of closeness, that I had had like an actual direct experience going to lots of farms, visiting and like observing practices, and being able to speak to like a lot of the more kind of logistical aspects of, process and, soil health and seed and, all these different aspects that I, have talked and taught about for years. And the major sort of overarching should be maybe more obvious than it is like, okay, so we like have access to all this amazing food and it's so beautiful and like look at the farmer, aren't they quaint and so cute? But like literally like that food that we get has to be grown and tended to and cared for and harvested and transported. Like all of these things have to happen. Like other humans have to like do all of that stuff to like get it to the grocery store and like get it to the farmer's market, you know? So there's this whole human element that's like not as visible and a lot of times on purpose is not as visible. So we have to, you know, do what we can to incorporate that sort of level of compassion and mindfulness for the things that we're eating. It's like to know that there is a human element. I would say almost arguably like there is a human cost, you know, to a lot of the foods that we eat. And, you know, I think, you know, the more trending concepts like conflict foods and like different things like that, you know, avocados and cashews and like people just kind of like connecting the dots that like, okay, well, if like I live in Nebraska or whatever, and I like obviously avocados like are not growing here, like they have to come from somewhere, you know. So those are like the preliminary questions that we're trying to get people to think about, like just eating seasonally, like thinking about like what grows here in my bioregion, like, you know, like kind of just that awareness of like, okay, so like what season is it, like how is that influencing like what I'm craving and like what kinds of foods I want to be eating and that are nourishing me. You know, and then there's this kind of secondary level of awareness that we're like trying to be like, okay, and then like who is responsible for that food, like who is growing that, like how are the people being treated on these farms, you know, like they can be very kind of dark isolated places, you know, like there's these mega farms that are churning out incredible amounts of food, you know, and we don't necessarily always know how the inner workings of their culture are. So, you know, we have to be diligent and at least begin to like think in this way. And I mean, when you think about energetics, like all of these things are informing, you know, and it's like our dollars could be literally going to promote like essentially modern day slavery, or like we can be promoting like a regenerative model that's like, you know, providing people with, you know, a healthy work environment, living wages, you know, sustainable practices for the earth. And, you know, so it's like, it's actually like the purchase power that we have in the food industry in particular, it's like people will sell what people will buy. So we have to remember that even though it feels kind of insignificant, that like I'm only one person, what difference can I make? It's like that individual purchase power has an enormous ripple effect in the marketplace. So we have to think about our purchases as, you know, am I contributing to the solution, or, you know, like what percentage of my purchases are contributing to the solution and what percentage do I not know about, like I don't know the consequences or like, you know, the practices behind these businesses that I'm supporting, or like what ones can I probably pretty quickly identify like are probably not going to the solution and actually part of the problem, you know. So, and no judgment too, you know, it's like the judgment can sometimes just shut us down, you know, and then it's like, like I can't deal with this, so like I'm just going to continue to like keep it in my blind spot because it's too overwhelming, you know. So it's just like we just start where we can, and that's where the conversation about farmers markets comes in, you know. It's like maybe you just start like going to your local farmers market every once in a while and like just get engaged with like meeting a farmer. Maybe it's not, you're not like buying every single thing you know eat from them, but it's like just the catalytic energetic propulsion of just eating one thing a week from a farmer's market that was grown by someone that you looked in the eye, you know, maybe don't shake their hand because it's COVID or whatever now, but like that you can say like thank you, wow, like what, you know, tell me about your farm. Or maybe that's not realistic for everyone, but like even just trying to expand our realm of understanding of our food to these sort of bigger picture, like zoom out, bigger picture concepts. Um, you know, that's a big part of my heart and my passion in this industry because of the mistreatment of so many, you know, members of our industrialized food system, the kitchen and restaurant culture, there's a lot of toxicity there. And so, anything we can do to like help bring the needle a little bit further this way, especially with COVID, we've seen a lot of things get sort of up from the dark below hidden area. It's always like service with a smile, it's like everybody's just acting like everything's fine, but there's actually, quite a bit of problematic behavior and practices going on. So, just being able to bring that level of mindfulness is like a huge part of why I do what I do. And, I don't want to overwhelm people, because that, it's like ultimately my message is like, eat more fruits and vegetables. And it, like at the food bank, they do a lot of amazing training with us about like, they say like, don't yuck my yum. And so it's like, if what you're doing is like eating canned fruits and vegetables from, wherever you're getting them, or like, you have frozen vegetables that you get from the grocery store, like if that's what works for you, like work with what's working, like that's where you're at, and like you're eating vegetables and like great, like good job, like keep going. And so sometimes, it can get really out there with like, and then we're like thinking, but it's really important that like the people who have the mental, emotional, spiritual bandwidth to hold these larger concepts, that we really continue to stretch ourselves, because there's a lot of very problematic behavior going on with our industrial farming system. So we really need to kind of like remember in our food practice, right, that we have these like way bigger issues that we can directly affect with our daily food choices. So that's a big part of how I like to explain sort of the food activism piece, in as bringing that into your food practice.
Oh, I love it. And I love that you acknowledge that it is not necessarily something that has to be in place 100% of the time. That is part of the practice and part of the wonderful, beautiful thing that we get for the fact that we have to eat several times a day. And so we get several times a day to practice this. That we don't need to keep the broader picture of food justice in mind 100% of the time. But if we can bring it a little bit, and if we can bring that awareness a little bit, and bring that awareness of the importance of ritual and beauty and such just a little bit, and know that you can come back again, you don't have to do it 100%, that as we do that, we build our capacity to do so more, that we build our capacity that then can extend into the rest of our lives too, to be able to hold that beauty, that power, that justice, and that nourishment for ourselves and for one another in the rest of our spiritual life. It's a beautiful thing.
I love that. Just you saying that even just reminded me that like, the nonlinearity of this whole, it's like, that's holism, it's like, sometimes we're like relating our food practice is relating to like, okay, I have this, capacity to think like, okay, like, I have this little extra room in my food budget, or like I'm able to be creative with these things that I already have in my pantry. So I'm going to like focus this week on buying like more organic vegetables, or like, but it's like literally every ounce that you can contribute to that, it's like giving back to you tenfold. So it's like the karmic repercussions of your decisions, like literally like the cellular information that you're taking into your body is like going to be higher quality, the nutrition is going to be higher, you know what I mean? It's like all these, it's like in so many ways, like as we give to our food practice, it's like we get, it's like we get to receive all the blessing and beauty and nutrition, health, increased immunity, like better digestive function, like all better mood and hormones, and like healing from literal chronic illness that people like suffer from for sometimes like most of their lives. It's like simple changes in diet can really be extremely powerful and effective in just increasing your quality of life. So this is a huge variable that we actually have quite a bit of control over. And, some of us come in with like great modeling, and my parents used to like, whatever, make me this, or showed me how to cook. And some people are just like, my mom fed us pork and beans, and like we ate mac and cheese every single day until I was like 12 or something. It's like everybody has like a different story that they're coming in with. So to just know that like little steps are what are most sustainable. It's like wherever you're at in your food journey is perfect. And you can show up, like you said, like it doesn't even have to be on like a daily register. It's like you can go like every meal can be like a new chance to approach your practice. And so just like with the breath, it's like they say you can like be born and die in a single breath. And like it's like truly like the same can apply to like the way that you approach food. And like some of us maybe are like kind of have like a tendency to mindlessly snack, or like when you're anxious like you do pleasure seeking and you're just like drink soda or whatever your like little trigger foods are, um to just bring the awareness, and it's not about judging yourself and beating yourself up or like getting in some negative cycle. It's about just bringing the awareness and being willing to be real with yourself about, what are my goals? Where am I trying to go? What do I believe in? What do I support? And how are my choices reflecting, my progress towards those goals or away from them?
It is a beautiful thing. And it has been such an incredible honor to talk with you today and for you to bring your beauty and power and justice and gorgeousness generally to this. So I'm sure that there are lots of people watching who are really excited to connect with you about these things. Where can you be found online other than your absolutely fabulous Instagram channel at Love Shovel? Where else?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love shovel. So I'll say a quick anecdotal story about my Instagram handle because sometimes people are a little curious about it. So way back when, before I even knew Instagram was a thing, my best friend was like, "There's this thing called Instagram and you have to get on it." This was right after my mom had passed away. I was 25 years old, and this was like a huge moment in my life. I was like going to the integrative nutrition school, and I was basically in this process of like creating a healing garden. Like I was really messed up. I could barely function. I just lost my like most important person in my life, and I had no idea how I was going to get through it. And so I had the opportunity to make this garden. And so I was shoveling dirt into this wheelbarrow like so many times a day. Like I was just like shoveling and shoveling and shoveling. Sometimes I would just like stop and cry. And sometimes I would like, just be, just like working with the earth can be just like so transformational. So I had the opportunity to do that. And one day I was shoveling the dirt into the wheelbarrow and I was like, I just feel like I'm a shovel for love. Sometimes I just feel like that's all I'm just like working on this thing called love. And it's like actual physical work. Like I'm a shovel and I'm moving the dirt from here to here. And that to me, that was like, I was like, oh, I'll make my Instagram name Love Shovel. And that to me has just continued to be kind of this like beacon. It's like kind of like a joke, but like the metaphor is real. It's like the golden shovel. It's like, that's me. It's like, I'm a tool for doing work for love, and like everything that I believe in and work towards, like I want to be aligned with that mission. So, Love Shovel is my Instagram, and my website is foodartlove.com. That's another great place to like I have some recipes and like a little blog and a calendar of events and different things going on there. And then I also recently launched a organic vegan hot sauce company since the pandemic. We've shifted gears away from catering large corporate events and weddings, obviously. So we're moving into the realm of products, and we have a gorgeous, amazing line of very gourmet, like organic, amazing vegan, gluten-free hot sauces, which is pdxhotsauceco.com. And so if you want to support my work, like that's a great place you can go and just like literally put something of mine like directly into your body. So I'm really excited to have an offering like that to share with everyone. We have just launched our website for sales like 3 weeks ago. So we're really excited to be out in the world and be able to share the products with people. We've worked really hard to get to this point. And then, yeah, like I am still doing retreats and occasional things here and there with different amazing healers and things that I, collaborate with. So, we still are doing some small event catering and things like that for
And if
events.
people are interested to collaborate with you, they can reach you through foodartlove.com.
Yeah, there's a contact page there, or there's a link in my bio and my Instagram as well.
Phenomenal. Shannon, as always, what a joy and a pleasure and a beauty to get to meet with you today. And thank you so, so much for everything you're doing and for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. I just absolutely love and adore you so much. You're so special. Thank
Oh
you.
my goodness, making me blush.
Thank you
And
so
now
much.
that I'm blushing, thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in for this beautiful session. Please stay tuned for all sorts of other great interviews for today. Again, I'm Nick Matos. What a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.